Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the collaboration album between Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile called Lotta Lice. So I think I've said this in the past, but sometimes there are collaborations that just make too much sense. Almost to the point where you hear about them and you wonder how on earth you didn't think about that first. These are artists that might have very similar style or attitude or type of production. It's just an artistic choice that fits together. And right from the start, when a lot of critics heard that Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile were teaming up for an album, the collective response from pretty much everybody was, well, duh. Of course they are. But I gotta admit, I was a little bit reticent. I'll be the first to admit that I haven't quite fallen head over heels for Kurt Vile the way that a lot of critics have over the past few years. Yeah, I know Pretty Pimpin' made one of my year-end lists, but beyond that, that album is not all that memorable. And it's mostly due to a naturalistic style of songwriting and composition that was right on the edge of being borderline and kind of sloppy. And if possible, I was even harder on Courtney Barnett's debut in 2015. Easily one of my most contentious reviews where I just was not able to buy into the self-contained millennial angst that seemed to add up to a fair bit less than the sum of its parts. All of Vile's detachment, but none of the bemusement or wry humor that could temper an edge that was just not matched in her production. But I understood how Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile could complement each other, with songwriting that would likely prove as tangled and meandering as ever, especially if they were looking to explore their own artistic process. But my curiosity was more on some of the sound of this album, because while Kurt Vile started off near lo-fi and garage rock, his material has gotten a fair bit more sedate over the past couple of years. I was curious how Courtney Barnett would play to that. So okay, where were they gonna take this sound on Lotta Lice? Well, they took it to exactly the same place that you would expect. Seriously, if you had any expectations on what this album might sound like, the weird thing about Lotta Lice is that it seems to fulfill all of them at some point, and yet still feels like the sort of shaggy, rambling, kind of sloppy, but still mostly cohesive project that we were inevitably going to get from this. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a great album. It's not, but you get the impression that it was never really trying to be, and that does have a certain low-key charm to it. It's pretty decent, I don't mind it. And I think part of the reason why this is, it comes in the overall performance style of the record. If you remember the lethargic, meandering side of mid-90s adult alternative, you're in the right ballpark with this album, except the compositions this time around are at best a little bit looser, and at worst, again, kind of sloppy. But if you were expecting the spacier side of Kurt Vile or the rougher edges behind some of Courtney Barnett, for at least as much rough edges as she has, well, in the latter case, it comes through with some of the welcome sizzle and some of the thicker tones that occasionally show up to anchor the grooves of songs like Fears Like a Forest, Out of the Woodwork, and On Script. And in the former case, it comes with tones that can feel a little bit more liquid, rather circular melodic progressions that nearly always seem to go on a little longer than they probably should. But that's pretty much true with a lot of songs on this album. And I say rather circular because, again, even despite some drum work and bass lines that are trying to hold together a tighter groove, the guitar player that isn't anchoring the main melody is playing with a slapdash casualness that might occasionally sync up well, but most often will just feel like they're just doing their own thing. Now, that's not saying that there aren't some good moments here. The borderline alternative country tones on Fears Like a Forest and Out of the Woods, they're definitely welcome for me. And the acoustic leaning tunes like Continental Breakfast and Peep and Tom, they're mostly pretty solid, they're generally enjoyable. But really, the tune that showcases the duo having the most fun on this album is Blue Cheese. Although throwing in the whistles and the gratuitous harmonica might be kind of pushing it a little bit. And yet, it's also very telling that this isn't really a jam session record either. The solos, they aren't incredibly distinct or developed. A term that many critics have used instead, though, is more of a workshopping album. And when you realize that a good third of this record are covers, either of previously recorded songs or by other artists, like Fears Like a Forest is a cover of a song that's written by Courtney Barnett's partner, and Untogether is an old belly tune from 1993, it's all the more apt here. It really is that sort of workshopping process, two artists just bouncing ideas off each other. So okay, what are Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile looking to explore with all this? Well, the straightforward answer, as I said, it's the artistic process, but it gets a little bit more complicated when you realize that there is a certain insularity to both of their styles, partially touched by some elements of depression, but also because Courtney Barnett and Kurt Vile are more interested in the nooks and crannies around their own intimate environment, rather than, say, you know, going outside. And to that point, even though the harmonies can feel a little bit slapdash, the writing does feel remarkably seamless. Two artists that are in distinct spaces of their own, but with the same mindset overall. But you know what? That's all framing of the situation. What's the record actually trying to say? Well, not really much concretely, but But again, it's not really trying to say a lot either. Most of it just feels like focusing on a certain insularity and coaxing out inspiration and getting into the right rhythm and vibe, which might be more free-flowing and organic than many around them can really understand or tolerate. Appreciating the little friendships and the little routines, and maybe wishing that they could engage with life and other people a little bit more, but you know what, that might actually involve going outside or saying or doing something, and this record just isn't gonna get that far. If anything, it's much more reminiscent to me of like some of the singer-songwriter types that were pretty prevalent in the 60s and 70s. In the general focus and flow, just chilling out, man. Maybe with a shade more melancholy here. Hell, it's almost easier to praise what this record doesn't do from a writing standpoint than what it actually does, positioning Kurt Vile and Courtney Barnett as more colleagues or professional peers, rather than close friends or, God forbid, any sort of wrong-headed romantic framing. But at the same time, I do wish a little bit more of Kurt Vile's chilled-out, wry whimsy had managed to creep onto this album, translating to some of the looseness into something that's a little bit weirder or more upbeat, or hell, a little bit funnier. The closest we get is the goofy semi-coherence of Blue Cheese, and maybe if we had gotten a few more original songs instead of the covers, we might have potentially seen more of that. But as it is, look, as I said, this is the sort of collaboration that will sound and feel like exactly what you think it would if you know both artists' material. And if you're going into this sort of loose, indie folk, alt-country leaning sound, you'll probably find this enjoyable in a low-key sort of way. Do I wish it had a little bit more momentum, took a few more chances? Yeah, sure, of course I do. But this is a record that's not really trying to engage with its audience beyond a couple good melodic grooves and some solid interplay in terms of vocals and lyrics. And as such, I do have a certain bit of distance from it, but at the same time, that is part of the point overall. This is an insular record too, and I don't begrudge it for existing, even if it's just gonna go off and do its own thing. So for me, you know what? Strong 6 out of 10, recommended for fans of both, but I think both I and the duo would warn against expecting anything mind-blowing on this project. But if you generally need something easy, generally pretty comfortable in the genre, yeah, worth a few listens. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Not really a lot to say on this project. It's pretty low-key. It's exactly what you would expect, but hey, you got the poll up there. You all tell me what you think. And if you want to buy the record, links in the description below. Beyond that, if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or potentially add something to the schedule, help support this channel, link to my Patreon is right over there. Where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.